El Cuerpo del Deseo, I always wonder why many call it Second Chance, because that's not the English translation. It actually means the body of desire. This telenovela follows the intriguing story of Don Pedro José Donoso, a wealthy old man who marries his young secretary, Isabel, despite warnings from his daughter and others. Isabel is revealed to be cunning and ambitious, marrying Don Pedro for his money. She secretly engages in an affair with Don Pedro's assistant, Andrés. When Don Pedro dies, a power struggle ensues between Isabel and Don Pedro's daughter, Ángela, over his vast estate. We start with Don Pedro José Donoso, awakening from a recurring nightmare. Each time, he sees a young, muscular peasant named Salvador toiling under the scorching sun on a farm. His loyal butler, Walter, gently rouses him, reminding him that today is his wedding day to his former secretary, Isabel Arroyo, a woman known for her ambition. In the midst of preparations, Don Pedro's spiritual and psychic advisor, Gaetana, storms into his library with a dire warning: marrying Isabel will bind him to a venomous serpent. Despite her ominous prophecy, Don Pedro dismisses her, severing their relationship with a generous settlement. To those around him, it's clear that Don Pedro's impending marriage is seen as his gravest mistake. Ángela, Don Pedro's only daughter, known for her wild spirit, bitterness, and rebellious nature traits reminiscent of her late mother, Catalina, whose beauty she inherited. Racing back from Europe, Ángela's mission was clear: to prevent her father from marrying what she bluntly referred to as a gold digger. Pedro had justified his decision in letters to Ángela, describing Isabel as a young, talented executive in his company, sincere, selfless, and seeking nothing more than moral support in his companionship to ease his loneliness in old age. Despite Ángela's haste, she arrives only to find the wedding concluded, meeting the newlyweds at the reception. In a charged introduction orchestrated by Don Pedro, Ángela wastes no time declaring war on Isabel. She dismisses Isabel's attempt to step into her mother's shoes as false, insisting that Isabel can never replace Catalina. At the reception, Isabel's co-workers, led by Liborio, openly acknowledge her striking beauty and rumored ambition, whispering about her motives for marrying an older man. Andrés, Don Pedro's trusted confidant and Isabel's lover, bristles at their gossip. As the general manager of Don Pedro's company and his right-hand man, Andrés defends Isabel vehemently, challenging their insinuations. As the argument between Pedro and Ángela becomes hotter, she breaks off all relationship with her father, telling him to forget he ever had a daughter, and walks down the stairs. Pedro can't bear the renunciation by his daughter. He runs after her, calling her name. In the process, he suffers a heart attack and falls to the ground. He then is rushed by an ambulance to the hospital, where he recovers 2 days later. While he's recuperating in the hospital, his new wife is rampaging in an orgy of sexual escapades with her ambitious and equally ruthless lover, Andrés, in the factory right on the table, improvised as a bed, in the office of the general manager. What a way to manage honeymoon for a convalescing boss and husband. Isabel Arroyo lives up to her reputation, and her true colors begin to emerge. Ángela's aunt Rebecca recently came to the mansion to fill the void left by her avaricious mother, reveals the dark and sordid past of the elegant Isabel. Born to humble beginnings as the daughter of a poor butcher, Isabel's ambitious nature became evident early on. She manipulated admirers and potential suitors to climb the social ladder. Meanwhile, Andrés Corona and Isabel engage in daring acts of infidelity right under Don Pedro's nose, as he plays the piano in blissful ignorance. Tragically, Ángela stumbles upon them in a compromising position, fleeing to inform her father. However, when she rushes to his side, she discovers Don Pedro lying lifeless across the piano keys. Adding to the betrayal, Don Pedro never had a single conjugal night with young Isabel, his wife, in the few months before they gradually snuffed the life out of him. He is dead now, thanks to the poisonous conspiracy of André and Isabel. After Donoso's passing, the battle lines were drawn. Ángela's camp included loyal figures like Abigail, a longtime servant, and her sons Antonio and Simon, who were treated like family by Don Pedro. Antonio, a bright young man pursuing his degree, had developed strong feelings for Ángela. However, Don Pedro never approved of their relationship, preferring instead for Ángela to marry Andrés Corona. Meanwhile, Andrés had genuinely fallen in love with Ángela, but misled Isabel, claiming his interactions with Ángela were only flirtations to conceal their affair. Unlike his brother, Simon preferred working at the factory and aimed to advance through hard work. He had discovered their secret relationship, but remained silent due to intimidation from Andres and Isabel. Angela's camp also includes all household servants, including Vicky, the longest-serving among them, and Azur, Don Pedro's beloved dog. Isabel commands the opposing camp, which includes Andres, whose impatience and greed were driven by a missed opportunity with a wealthy industrialist who saw him as the son he never had. Had Andres exercised patience, he could have secured his position as a true heir and reaped the benefits accordingly. Another member in the camp is her Aunt Rebecca, who has just come to the house from a small town where she was a miserable maid. Initially, she seemed down to earth and was very friendly with everyone at the house. But the taste of this lavish life corrupted her into an egocentric old woman who assumes an elegant stature as though she grew up in riches. It also includes Walter, Don Pedro's trusted butler, who used to just put on an act. But after Don Pedro's death, he is showing his true colors. The camp also includes Valeria, Isabel's cousin, who is torn apart because she has no bad blood with the other camp and does nothing to harm them. But she has to be loyal to Isabel. Without Isabel, she would still be in an asylum without the support that she currently gets from Isabel, who dearly loves her. Valeria had been admitted after both her parents had tragically died, making her fall into depression, and it was Isabel who got her out of there and took care of her ever since. Valeria secretly was in love with Don Pedro and was always fascinated by his piano music. She would sneak and listen to his music behind the library door, where he used to play the piano. Andres' love for Angela ignited a rivalry and warpath with his lover, Isabel, leading to a conflict that ultimately consumed Andrés Corona. During Isabel's absence in Brussels for her mother's funeral following an air crash, Andres made 2 reconciliatory and romantic visits to Angela to express his feelings for her. Unfortunately, the second visit ended disastrously when Isabel unexpectedly returned and found Andres in Angela's bedroom. Despite Andres' desperate attempts to explain, Isabel swiftly concluded that Andres' affections lay with Angela and accused him of manipulating her for selfish gains. She vehemently expressed her disillusionment, declaring their bond was based on desire and convenience, warning that it could end at any moment due to his betrayal of her trust. Isabel dismissed him, emphasizing their entanglement in treachery, deceit, and conspiratorial actions. Meanwhile, in Las Cruces, Don Pedro José Donoso wakes up in a prison of a new 33-year-old body and environment, different from the one he has been accustomed to for 70 years. His last memory was playing his piano, but now he finds himself inside a box. Pedro strikes the box with such force that it opens, revealing preparations for his burial. Pandemonium erupts as Pedro, now inhabiting the body of Salvador Cerinza, a man from his recurring dreams, bolts for his life from the mob chasing him. Amidst his bewilderment over his resurrection, the police eventually apprehend him after a fierce struggle, revealing Salvador Cerinza's astonishing strength, which Pedro now possesses. The deep mystery causes an uproar in the small town of Rio Clara. Everywhere he is taken, he is revered and worshipped as a saint who has risen from the dead. How can an unlettered poor peasant wake up from the dead and exhibit traits of excellence, which only the cultured rich industrialist could manifest? Nobody believes him. At least, nobody believes he is Pedro José Donoso, since nobody understands the mystery of his metamorphosis from Pedro to Salvador. Not even him understands the mystery that he represents. To slump into slumber one night and wake up the next day in a different body in a different village, where everyone knows him as someone other than who he is. He cannot argue with them because when he looks in the mirror, he sees a complete stranger staring back at him. He falls to his knees at the foot of the cross and cries out to God, if only he knew what happened to him. I am an old man worn down by years of infirmities, a man who has dedicated the rest of his life to his loved ones. Can't you see that this is not my body? I am not Salvador Cerinza. I am Pedro José Donoso from Rio Clara. I am an accomplished industrialist, not a peasant. I am not suffering from amnesia. My memory is with me always. You cannot help me. The only one who can help me is me. Let me go now. With these torrents of pathetic words, the misunderstood Pedro José Donoso fills his audience of medical specialists with both compassion and terror at the same time. Medical science fails to acknowledge things of the spirit. The doctors think he is suffering from split personality disorder. The religious Reverend Father thinks he is a demon possessing the body of another person. The single ladies think he is a powerful seducer whose personality cast a romantic spell on them. To the people, he is a supernatural saint sent by God to bless them. From the cemetery where he escaped from being buried alive, to the police station presided over by an egocentric Sheriff Ocampo, to the hospital with a dose of daily sedation to recover from his shocking mystery, to a sex-starved widow's house, to escaping the prying eyes of investigative journalists, to the private quarters of the Catholic Church, under the spiritual guidance of a religiously proud Reverend Father Jacobo, and finally back to the hospital as a medical specimen and guest of scientists and psychiatric specialists. The full circle of the adventures is complete. He craves to return to where he had come from. He knows that the mystery that surrounds his metamorphosis will be unraveled there. For him, that will be his ultimate freedom. To appear to people whom he knows. Cantalicia Muñetón, the epitome of the rough and poor peasantry. She demands to be given back her husband, Salvador. Even though they tell her he is insane, she is ready to cope with him. And, truly, she would have coped if Salvador was mad, because she herself is a streak of peasant lunacy. Unfortunately, the Salvador that is returned to her is an epistle of cultured, educated, sober, and of high intellect. Not a madman. This she can't cope with, because his reasoning is far above her level of peasant comprehension. She comes to the inevitable conclusion, telling her poor son, Mancho, saying, "This is not your father, this is not my husband. He has become a whining old man. He thinks too much. He showers too much and complains all day about every dirt in this house. He sees me as the pig in this house. In the past, I used to force him take a shower. Now he talks funny. He is even lazy and a coward. He won't fight his worst enemy, and he won't work on the farm." At the mansion, Isabel has gotten her finger on her problem. Her problem is Andrés Corona, her playboy lover and criminal accomplice. She has discovered that his heart pants after another girl, and that is Angela, the only daughter of the man they both murdered. She broke into tears after the act, but Corona was cold-blooded about the death of Pedro. She is having a rethink about possible marriage to Corona. Few months after the death of Pedro, she is looking for an excuse to postpone the marriage to Andrés Corona, possibly because she fears that Corona may in likewise manner kill her in order to lay his hands on Angela. When Valeria accuses her of betraying Pedro, she confesses that it was because André is like an addiction. She loves him for the crazy things he made her to do. Now it is clear that he is like a drug or cigarette, which you know is injurious to your health, but have no power to stop smoking. A terrible and deadly virus or a viper. Time would tell if this couple would last. Sudden birthday party thrown by Isabel does not go without its own gravitating drama. She feels so unsecured by the seeming reunion of André and Angela, and she goes there to interrupt what she thinks may be another escapade by this duo, which may leave her out in the cold. At that point, Angela excuses herself and leaves them. After Angela's departure, Corona comments about the gleam of love in Angela's eyes, which he has never seen before. In actual sense, he doesn't know that he has lost out to Antonio. In the Cupid game, he might end up being a double loser. Isabel is suddenly jealous, but he quickly reassures her that she was the only love of his life. As they toasted the wine, André toasts to her, to himself, and to both of them. Isabel's turn to whip him emotionally comes when she toasts, saying to someone irreplaceable, "Pedro Donoso." That abruptly ends the romantic night for André. He hates competition, and whenever Isabel reminds him that Pedro's void in her heart could not be filled by him, he usually goes out sour, and sourly. This might be the reason for her chickening out of the plan to marry him as soon as Pedro died. She is discovering that her cold-blooded partner may not truly be in love with her. After all, as she is with him, even after helping him to murder an old weak man. Andrés has his last emotional slap on Isabel. After the guests have gone, Auntie Rebecca urges Andrés to frequent the mansion. He assures her that he will soon come to live with them, not as a guest, but as the man of the house. He then quips that he is not good enough to replace Don Pedro. Isabel protests that she never meant to spite him with her irreplaceable comment. He bids them good night and leaves. In Las Cruces, Salvador successfully dislodges the warring neighboring peasants, who have come to attack him and his family. Everybody gets scared by the unusual knowledge of letters that he possesses. To them, this is a weird situation. Even the old peasant warns his 3 sons to steer clear of him, because he says he knew him since he was a child in the village, and is certain the strange being is not Salvador Cerinza, but a possessed being. Cantalicia reports Salvador's strange manners to Father Jacobo. She confesses to him that the reason why she too beat a retreat is because she is terrified of him. but Father Jacobo assures her to be patient with him, and he turns down her request that they come and take him to an asylum. She accuses him of offending her with the ugly things he said about her, saying she has begun to believe what the neighbors said about him being a weirdo. She locks him out and does not allow him to sleep the night inside their shack. It is an emotional moment when he too admits saying he doesn't know the man Salvador Cerinza, but he assures her that he is different from him. Maybe her Salvador truly died on that day and he replaced him. The father of the boy Moncho really died and simply disappeared, as he too will soon disappear. He assures her that the real Salvador still loves her, wherever he is now. At that point, she draws near to him and weeps profusely, begging him not to disappear. He frankly tells her that he can't continue to live with her, because doing so only makes her life miserable. He says it is the best thing for everybody. He concludes by saying her and Monchito can't live with a stranger, and that he now knows what he has to do, that he must go, and he then bids her goodbye. He leaves without looking back. On getting outside, he embraces and kisses the sorrowful boy Moncho and leaves. After Salvador parts with Cantalicia, it is Mrs. Lilia that is his first point of call. She is a sex-starved widow who was fortunate to host Salvador, away from the prying eyes of roving journalists who used to come to cover the strange story of the man who resurrected from the dead. That was an opportune moment for her pent-up desire to burst at the emotional seams. She went haywire with lust and practically did almost everything from the books of lust to get Salvador to the bed. But Pedro Donoso, a man of high moral fortitude, wouldn't give in. She accused him of casting a strong love spell on her, so he was removed from her house to the church. He explains why he has to rediscover his destiny and his need for a token loan to buy ticket for the trip to Rio Clara. She gets angry and accuses him of not loving her enough. She refuses to give him any money, saying she cannot afford to let him go away from the region, much less from her life. She screams with ecstasy and gyrates her little body, crying unto Salvador, asking him to hug her, kiss her, love her, and make love to her, for she had longed for ages for a hunk like him, so she can't let him go. Salvador tries unsuccessfully to calm her down. He leaves her and goes his way into the night, but Mrs. Lily won't let go. She runs after him and catches up with him, asking him to call her by her first name, Lily. She kneels down, begs, and hangs unto him. She eventually succeeds in preying on his dire need for money and lures him back to her house for the money he needs for his trip. On getting there, she brings her life savings, which runs into hundreds of thousands of dollars. But Salvador tells her it is very little money he needs for his trip. She throws the money carelessly on the sofa and begs him to wait briefly for her, to change and follow him to Rio Clara. The temptation is so great for Salvador at this point to take the little he needs for his trip and bolt, or wait for her to come out and seduce him. She emerges dressed seductively, inviting him to the bedroom, only to find a note beside her savings purse explaining that he had taken some money and promised to repay her someday. Enraged, she angrily calls him a cowardly bastard, swearing revenge for his actions. She goes to Sheriff Ocampo and fabricates a story, accusing him of breaking into her house, assaulting her, and coercing her to give him all her savings. She falsely claims he attempted to rape her, demanding his capture and punishment. Despite the police's efforts, he outsmarts them and escapes on a bus to Rio Clara. Stay tuned for part 2 as Pedro José Donoso returns to his mansion. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment.